Okie doke. But I think we can get started then. So, basically, thank you everyone for being here. This session is going to be also recorded, but we will see if that all works out with Zoom and stuff like that, since it's been a little glitchy the past few days. But yeah, so I think we can get started then, McKenna, if you want to
Okay.
move on to the next slide. So
So
basically,
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
So basically, we're going to format this in such a way that we're going to go year by year through like the different things that you need to be thinking about and starting to do along your pre-med journey. So obviously, like this is just kind of like a rough guideline. You shouldn't feel like pressured or anything to be like starting something at like a certain point in your journey. Everyone goes at like a different pace. Everyone has different circumstances. But this is just the way that we decided to format it just to make it easier for questions and stuff like that. So basically, we're going to go through that timeline and also talk about the MCAT, preparing for it, and basically advice for that as well.
Alrighty.
Alrighty, so now we can start.
So your freshman year, I think one of the most important things is to get to know who your advisor is. They're going to be one of the people who you can go and ask questions to just because, yeah, you have freshman friends who may be going through the same thing as you, but they might not know as much as you don't. So make sure you communicate well with your advisor. Understand the prerequisites because there's a lot. It's going to take a chunk out of what your schedule is. And that's where you're going to want to maintain your GPA at. So understand what you're going to have to take and understand your whole entire college journey and what each classes will be each year. And I think a really important one is establishing a method of studying. A lot of people don't really know, like, I know I didn't really know how to study in high school just because, like, I don't know, high school is a lot different than college. You get a lot of coursework in college. So it's kind of a time management thing and managing how you're going to read. There's a lot of reading and doing all this, writing essays and doing that. So establishing that method is very important. Obviously, volunteering and shadowing, it's good to start then. And start researching too, because time flies. I know I started in my freshman year and it's kind of like a long way. So I was kind of like unrealistic about it. But now I'm glad that I did and understand like the missions of each one and like narrowing down which one I wanted. And then getting involved in health related organizations and just becoming on your campus and just being a part in your community is very important as well. So that's freshman year as a broad term.
Yeah. So now we're going to go into some questions based off of freshman year. So I guess we can do this either like sequentially, like each of you like respond. I think that that'll just be the best way to go about it. So the first thing is a lot of people maybe have had bad experiences perhaps with like their pre-med advising and stuff like that. I guess the first question would be, did you have like a strong support system at your school for pre-med advising? And if so, or if not, how do you think that affected you? And any of you can start.
I guess I'll jump in real quick. For anyone who doesn't have access to those resources, I went to a university in England and there was not any sort of pre-med advisors that I had access to. And if you're in a similar situation wherever you are, I know the AAMC does provide some sort of links and suggested avenues for finding advisors who are involved in the medical field through that.
So I guess I'll go next. So I think like I regret not going to my advisor a lot, especially during my early years. So I chose medicine kind of late. So when I went to my advisor, I didn't really do the best in coursework my freshman year. So it ended up being a pretty big turnoff for me in terms of my advisors were like, I don't know if this will happen. You should probably think of something else, a different route. But for me, I truly knew that I wanted to do medicine. So I had kind of a rough start with advisors. So to me, it was more using external resources, using doctors that I became friends with through shadowing or any type of volunteership. So if you guys do have a bad experience with an advisor, Always take their word with a grain of salt sometimes. Sometimes they're very by the book, very, checking boxes off. If you want to go to med school, you could definitely do it. So I would just say use external resources and people that you do trust, and especially positive support system as well. That's going to point you in the right direction.
Awesome.
I can go. I was similar to Alex. I decided later on, and I was going to say the same thing. Like, just take what they say with a grain of salt. Do your own research. If you have a good one, that's great. Use it as a support system. If not, you're fine without it.
All right.
Yeah, I actually was in the transition year of losing a advisor at the time, so I really didn't have anyone to fall back on. My freshman year, we had an advisor. She wasn't that great, honestly, so I didn't really go to her much. But then when I was in the application cycle my junior year, we actually didn't have a pre-med advisor at the time, so I kind of researched the schools and did a lot of this stuff by myself, and it's definitely doable. But if you have a good advisor, it's great to build a relationship, especially when it comes committee letter time. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Okay, great. So thank you all for that. So the next question that we're going to, I guess, discuss a little bit is going to be about a little bit about classes. So obviously there are the prereqs, and like we said, you should look into those for the schools that you're interested in applying to. Pretty broadly, a lot of them have the same requirements, but some might have like some specific differences. So you should check those out for that kind of thing. Like some would require biochem, some don't, but it's still like something that's nice to have regardless. In terms of classes, let's see. Let's start with freshman year. Like maybe like what courses do you feel like you struggled in, and what advice do you have for them?
Sorry, you cut out for a moment. Who did you want to start with?
Oh, sorry. I said, can we start with what advice do you have for courses that you struggled in? And anyone can start. Ruby, you can start if you want. We'll just go in the same order.
Okay, I guess I'll go for that then. Coursework was a lot harder than, high school, and I'm sure everyone who's currently in university can attest to that. Really setting yourself up with a good schedule, and really sticking to that and pushing yourself. Don't leave things till the last minute. I can't say that enough. And it will also set you up really well for preparing for the MCAT as well. I know at my university, which may not be a thing that happens in the US, our freshman year actually didn't even count towards our sort of final grades, so to speak. So a lot of people really kind of slacked off and didn't take that seriously. And even if it doesn't count, it's really important to build up that mentality for approaching studying just for your entire future. So definitely, don't slack off.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So I guess I'll go next. So like I sort of said, I didn't really excel academically in my freshman year, but I do have to say, luckily, I didn't declare biology and pre-med until my junior year, actually, of college. So a little bit non-traditional in that sense. So I can't really speak too much about issues freshman year, but for me, at least, I was pretty glad that I was doing a lot of the gen eds freshman year and was able to sort of work out like study kinks before actually starting science classes, because for those of you who are going into your freshman year of college and you want to do pre-med, you're either choosing biochem, or even if you're not, just know that those pre-med classes are really challenging, especially if you're not the best at math, but you have to take physics and you have to take statistics. I would just go in, sort of level-headed and sort of figure out what works for you in terms of approaching those classes and studying, because what may work in high school may not work when you start those classes up. So I would just say keep an open mind. Definitely if you have a study group, I'm a big proponent in that. in terms of learning the material prior, then going into a big group, a lot of other people have different perspectives that could possibly allow you to see a problem from a different angle and can actually bring the whole story together. So that's my sort of advice for that.
Well, there was plenty of courses that I struggled with, but I think the biggest thing for me was learning how to study. I was in the trap of like going into the textbook or like just like brute force, like writing notes and stuff. And what I learned is it's really about like application and active recall, like doing a lot of practice problems and really testing your understanding. So I would say that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what John was saying. And another thing is just staying on top of your work. I think the biggest thing for me was kind of having like a plan, having goals written out for the week, making sure I'm staying on top of my coursework while also having time to, have to myself and focus on some extracurriculars. So it's really about finding that balance. And it does take trial and error in the beginning, which can make it tough. But once you find it, you can just kind of stick to it throughout your undergrad years.
Awesome. Okay, thank you all for that. So the next thing we're going to go into is, since you guys practically covered the studying aspect with the classes, we'll just go into volunteering and shadowing. So obviously for this, it's obviously like kind of going to differ for each of you, but if maybe you want to touch on one or two experiences you had with volunteering or shadowing, maybe also when you got started on it, since a lot of people don't actually start at freshman year. We'll start with that. So we'll just go in the same order again.
Yeah, so I've been involved in various volunteering activities since I was in middle school, but not to a really large extent. And I really started ramping up on that more once I got into university. And this includes non-medical fields as well. Working with tutoring or teaching is also a really valued experience, and being involved in your community. And I'm sure many of you have come across that. Schools like to see applicants who have maintained volunteering over long periods of time, particularly with like the same volunteer group. As far as things like shadowing going, that can be kind of tricky to find an opportunity, particularly right now. So I know that, pre-pandemic, you could directly reach out to doctors in your area. And currently there are some virtual shadowing opportunities going on online as well.
So I did a ton of shadowing, which honestly, looking back, I definitely don't recommend. I think more in terms of like clinical volunteership, at least for medical schools, is sort of like the gold standard now. Because it gets you within the clinic, it gets you being active, it gets you talking to patients. Shadowing is more along the lines of sort of being like a fly on the wall. But with that being said, I did a ton of it. It was a great opportunity for me to get into the OR. In terms of increase in clinical volunteership, I guess what I did was a little bit more untraditional again. In graduate school, I found a club where we would 3D print prosthetic hands and upper limb assisted devices. So to me, I was able to sort of relate that to a clinical experience, because it was all about talking to quote unquote clients, basically seeing what their need was, if they wanted us to satisfy them being able to eat, them being able to play the violin. And then it was taking those problems and sort of synthesizing and creating a prototype for them to basically achieve that goal. And it was very sort of, it kind of resembled how doctors, I think, usually think through problems and hearing out the patient, figuring out what they could do, and basically coming up with a solution to their problem. So that was sort of my, well, at least the way that I attacked clinical volunteership. It was a little bit non-traditional, but it was a really good experience in itself.
All right. I definitely could have done more volunteering. I was always kind of wanted to have an income, so all my experiences clinically were paid. I did do, like in college, I volunteered, like just giving like directions at the hospital, doing little things like that. And I think I volunteered at like a bunch of like events, doing like administrative stuff. But I think it did come up a few times during interviews, like just asking why I didn't volunteer more. So I would say it's really important. As far as shadowing goes, I didn't have a ton either. I probably had like 40 hours, but like Alex said, I think it's more about just trying to get a perspective. It's not really a clinical experience. So as long as you have something and you have a few different kinds of specialties, I think that's good.
Yeah, I did a kind of a mix. I didn't do a ton of shadowing. I probably did like 50, 60 hours. I did most of my stuff at a local hospital. I went to kind of a lower income hospital, did about 200 hours plus there. The biggest thing I'd recommend is kind of consistency, not cramming all your hours in a short duration of time, because you do have to say when you started and when you ended the activity. And they'll kind of see it as you just checking off a box if you're cramming it in 1 month. So I kind of try to do mine, I think about 1.5 years worth of hours. And those are like the two main things that I did. Yeah, that was pretty much it.
All right, thank you guys. So the next question will be about how did you guys go about making your school list, and any advice on that? So I know obviously like the two big umbrellas are like those community service oriented ones and then the research oriented ones. Do you guys apply to like a mix of both or one or the other, or are you planning on, for Ruby, to apply to one or the other?
Yeah, so I found the MSAR to be a really excellent tool. It has so much information. I would highly recommend getting a subscription to that. It's fairly affordable, I believe. I am personally more interested on kind of a research track, and so that's something I've been really focusing on when I've been looking at schools. Looking at the school websites as well is, also really helpful because they talk about their mission and the communities they're involved in and things like that. So I'd say the MSAR and the school websites themselves resources for making those decisions.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, the MSAR should be like the gold standard for anyone who's putting their school list together. I think you could run through sort of like a checklist with yourself, and it could sort of narrow into schools. So like the first big one is sort of like location, like where do you want to end up? Do you want to be East Coast, West Coast, Central? And then from there, you can pretty much pinpoint schools that sort of fit into your ranges. And I think it's like really important when devising a school list that where a lot of us in here are science majors or are interested in the sciences is playing the probability game. So if a school is way outside of your MCAT or your GPA, I always say that those are like the two big filters that start. So you definitely want to give yourself the best chance by finding schools that are within your ranges. And then from there, I think it's great to dig a little bit deeper into the MSAR, into the demographics. So when I did that, I knew I wanted to be on the East Coast, found out schools that were within my ranges. Then started looking at their demographics. I was kind of non-traditional. I did a master's program. So who takes older kids? What kind of volunteership? They look at research heavily. So I think that that's really important, is to really do like a self-check once again. And then you could actually, get some schools on there that are a pretty good mix of schools that you have like a good chance to get into. And then you could obviously throw 1 or 2 reaches, but you never want to be donating to schools. I always say that it's too expensive.
So I pretty much just did GPA, MCAT, and then in-state statistics based off MSAR. And then maybe if I saw like an outlier on the blogs and stuff, I would exclude it. But I also use this like program. I'm going to send it in the chat actually. It had like just come out when I applied, but they basically have collected all these statistics and they have like forecasting that basically they give you like your percentage of getting an interview. So I used that a little bit and kind of took it with a grain of salt, but I think it's a good resource if you guys want to check it out.
Yeah, I really went by the same as everyone else with the MSAR and kind of just built my school list off of that. I try to apply as broadly as possible, being realistic, not applying to too many reach schools. And it was just kind of odd how it all worked out. I mean, there's a lot of schools I didn't think I'd interview at, and I did get an interview and vice versa. So it really is such a random process. And by increasing your odds by looking at in-state versus out-of-state, GPA, MCAT, and obviously it's a holistic approach to the application process. So they do take into account your extracurriculars and essays. So none of those stuff are not, they're not minimal. I mean, those activities do matter, but you're not going to make up for a terrible GPA or MCAT score. So you really want to just like try to keep it as balanced as possible.
Perfect. Okay, so I think now we're going to go on to year 2.
Okay. So sophomore year, again, just like maintain communication with your advisor or whoever, like I said, if it's a doctor or anybody who you feel comfortable with, monitor your GPA, make sure that you're not decreasing because it's easier to tank your GPA than build it back up. Continue researching your schools, continue your prereqs because it does take a couple years. And what I did, I just started keeping a log of what I was involved in, organization shadowing, blah, 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 because it's easy to forget. And if you do want to do a bunch of range of things, then you can go back to your log and say, okay, yeah, I did that. And you did it from this time to this time. Because like they said, they're going to ask that in the interviews. So it's easier to have it all together than try and remember on a iffy timeline, you know? So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, McKenna. So now we're going to go into some questions regarding this kind of stage. So the first one we'll start off with is we didn't talk about research yet. So we'll just go around again. And if you can talk a little bit about, you know, what kind of research maybe you did and when you started and whether or not you decided to continue it, because I think a lot of people think that they have to continue it, but maybe they didn't have to.
Yeah, so at my university, the big opportunity for research was our dissertation that we had to write. And so I undertook a in silico research project, which I really enjoyed, and that was throughout the year. Additionally, I had the opportunity to work at a biotech startup in the laboratory for a year. It was technically part of my degree as an industrial experience, but it was something I had to find and secure myself. So if you don't have a large opportunity or the time while you're in university to take part in research projects there, it's absolutely possible to reach out to other companies and organizations to try and find research opportunities there. Startups particularly are looking for interns. You know, they can pay you less, unfortunately, or you can be a voluntary experience, which they're happy to accommodate. And that's how I found my position, as I was reaching out to a variety of startup companies, and sometimes you may even have connections to them that you didn't even know about, which was also the case for me. And I was directly emailing, you know, CEOs and stuff, and I did hear back from a few people, but definitely reach out to a lot of places.
So I didn't do research in undergrad. I was an athlete in college. I didn't really have like a lot of time to spare because either I was practicing or studying. So I actually started researching in graduate school. I started with an orthopedic practice up in New Jersey, and did research during my whole entire time in graduate school. And then to sort of like, I guess, roll in and give sort of like the medical perspective as well, is that like, you know, if you're interested in like a competitive specialty, they definitely look for research in medical school. So if you're interested in taking a gap year, or you know you're going to have time off, and you know you're interested in a competitive specialty, I would definitely recommend but definitely getting involved in research, just because they're starting to get more competitive year by year. But to keep it kind of short, I started research kind of late. I truly enjoy it. It's a pretty fun time. Sometimes it's a little taxing with classes and everything like that. But I would definitely recommend getting into it and getting involved.
Similar to Alex, I did a post-bac, so I didn't have any research until I did my post-bac. So while I was doing my post-bac, I worked on a clinical research project, which was actually ended up being a really bad experience. Like, I killed myself working there, like balancing it with school. And they just basically had me cold calling patients like 8 hours a day. and I didn't even get put on the publication. So be careful. But then during my glide year, I kind of got lucky cold emailing people, and I ended up working at a lab for a year, like while I was applying to medical school. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually did most of my research on campus with a professor that was teaching organic chemistry. I kind of emailed her. We had a meeting, and I ended up, it was kind of, it was a good setup because I was able to just be on campus, go there after class, do some research. And then I ended up doing like a summer program with her on campus as well, where I spent the summer there. And yeah, it was in organic chemistry, and I did a little bit in immunology as well with a company. That was my sophomore year, kind of just emailing around and seeing who I could get hold of.
Okay, great. So the next question is going to be a little bit about mentorship. It also is going to kind of a little bit relate to any sort of healthcare orgs. Some people join them when they're, on campus, like AMSA. I think that's like the biggest one, but there are other ones too. Did you guys join any of those kind of stereotypically maybe pre-med clubs? And if so, do you think that maybe you benefited from the mentorship components maybe that they had, or did you have to seek mentorship elsewhere?
Yeah, so like a lot of people here, it seems, I decided that I was interested in medical school kind of late in the game as well, during my undergraduate degree. And being at a foreign university, I types of organizations that I could get involved in. So I wasn't able to take advantage of them during that time. Looking back, it's definitely something I wish that I had known about to get involved in, because it's such a complicated process of pursuing medical school. It's always comforting and informative to have these types of resources and support for sure.
Yeah, sort of piggybacking off of that, I knew I wanted to do medicine late as well. So I didn't have that, but to be honest with you, like Ruby said, like looking back, like it's a great support system. And although sometimes it might feel like it's like a competitive environment, which it's just bound to be, I think that, being part of those groups definitely keeps you focused and keeps you sort of on par on what you should be doing each year. So I would definitely recommend maybe getting involved with it. However, I also do want to say, like, if you don't like the environment, that's completely understandable. I don't think you'll be missing out tremendously if you're not involved, but it would be nice to be, friends with other pre-meds and try and keep each other on like the right path.
Yeah, so similarly, I wasn't part of anything pre-med in undergrad, but during my post-bac, we just kind of all had each other going through the same process. And also we met people who were like a year ahead of us in the process who like we could lean on and ask questions. So yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I also wasn't really part of any organizations on campus or anything pre-med related. I played baseball, so I had a couple of friends on the baseball team that we kind of used to study together, and they were old. A couple of them were older and were able to give me advice. But yeah, if it's possible, I mean, it's great to get some sort of mentorship, but I don't think it's super necessary. You just got to be proactive yourself and try to figure out what the process entails.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to go into, I guess, junior year.
Alrighty. It's going to sound a little bit redundant, but redundancy is important just so you make sure that you're maintaining like your structure of your years, because obviously it's important to not decline over the years, your GPA, most importantly. So advisor communication. I started thinking about my recommendation letters just because I know that's a big portion of what you need. And you don't want to wait till the last minute because you don't want to scramble and find somebody who isn't like the best fit, I guess. MCAT preparation, taking the MCAT, whether you want to take it your junior year or whether you are deciding if you want to take a gap year. This is a great time to start thinking about it even before then. Application submission, monitoring your GPA, continuing your experiences, and then continuing with your prereqs.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of go a little bit more quickly for junior/senior year, just so that we can get to everyone else's questions in the Q&A, which is great. Everyone has a lot of questions, and we're gonna try to get through as many of them as possible. So just the major question that I'm gonna ask for kind of these 2 years, if you wanna go back to junior year just really quickly, um, is going to be in regards to studying for the MCAT. So a lot of people, if they are obviously not taking a gap year, will have to start thinking about that around, maybe before junior year, during junior year, like spring. When did all of you decide to study for your MCAT, and maybe what resources did you use?
Yeah, so I had absolutely no plans to take the MCAT during my undergraduate degree. My junior year, I was working, 10 to 13 hours a day in a laboratory, and my senior year, I was working on my dissertation. So there's really no need to overload yourself so that you're in medical school a year earlier. I think it's much more important to take your time and really perform to the best of your ability and be happy with your performance and not completely burn yourself out. I think that's so important. So I waited until after I'd graduated. I was taking some prerequisite courses in addition at community colleges to boost up my application while I was studying for the MCAT as well. So I devoted about 8.5 months of studying for that test, but I really allowed myself to take a calm pace with it, so that I wasn't super stressed out and I didn't have a lot of other, school obligations on top of it. And I'm really, really happy with that decision. It turned out really well for me, and it wasn't too stressful, and it didn't burn me out. So I would definitely recommend taking that route as well. Some of the resources I use that I would highly recommend, particularly if you don't have a lot of disposable income, is I took advantage of MCATselfprep.com. They have a variety of packages, and a lot of their resources are actually free, and they have it set up in different lessons that you can sort of follow along, and they have videos posted up, and then they recommend chapters in the Princeton or Kaplan review books. I also use the Kaplan review. I found them extremely helpful, and a lot of people use flashcards, which I also found really helpful, and there's a variety of resources for flashcards as well. You can make your own. A lot of people use Anki. MCAT Self Prep also has a set of flashcards, and for their cheapest package, I think is $10, they provide you with a kind of spreadsheet to help you plan your studying and keep track of your scores, which I found incredibly helpful. And whether or not you actually purchase that, I would recommend having a spreadsheet and keep track of what you're doing and how you're doing for sure, because that was super helpful for me.
To sort of, I guess, back Ruby's point on like, don't rush it. I rushed it and did horrible on it. And then I came back and dedicated a solid 3 months to studying and was able to boost my score by 16 points. So I would say definitely prepare for it. And I would say even look into preparing for it like a year in advance. Like just when you're going to take it, just set like an optimal test date for you. That not only works with, your school schedule, but also your work schedule. Because your study period might be different than the other person's. And that's completely normal. So like Ruby said, she studied for like 8 months and took it pretty slow. I kind of, worked really hard just for a quick 3 months and then took it. Everyone's sort of different. I think that finding the right resources is definitely huge. So I used the Princeton Review. The second time I took it, I used Kaplan the first time. To be completely honest with you, I don't see a difference in either one. If you want to use Kaplan or Princeton Review, that's completely fine. My school just provided me with the Princeton Review when I took it my second time. And then in terms of like free resources that are great, Khan Academy. I mean, I can't say it enough. Their videos are unbelievable at just like bringing concepts down to like a very granular level. And they explain things really well, and they have practice questions. And other cheap ones, honestly, for the price, I would say the double AMC material is actually relatively on the cheaper side. If you're looking at Princeton Review and Kaplan courses, they run, $2,500. But you can get a lot of the section banks, the Q banks, and practice exams from double AMC, which is the test company, for pretty cheap, for relatively cheap price. And those are the ones that you're going to want to sort of key on towards, upcoming your exam I would say within like a month of the exam, because those are going to be the questions that are going to be the most indicative. But yeah, I would just say know when you're looking to take it and just sort of think about what your schedule is going to look like around then. And then you'll be in a good spot to start planning how you want to study.
All right, so the advice I got and I ended up following, and it worked out pretty well for me, is like the content review. You can kind of pick your poison, Kaplan, Princeton review, whatever. But a month out, what I did is I switched over entirely to the materials from the AAMC, and they make the test guys do everything they put out. It's like the easiest way to boost your score, and also just sticking with their stuff for a month, I think gets you like really fluent with how they're going to ask you questions. And don't run out of time on the car section like I did.
Yeah, so I took my MCAT, probably not the best time now looking back at it. It was my junior year. I hadn't taken biochemistry or half of physics, so it was a little bit of a longer process for me. I had to teach myself biochem and a little bit of physics. But I totally agree with John that you just got to switch over to the AAMC material. At least give yourself a month to go through all of it. Even if you can do 2 passes through it, that's even better. A lot of those questions were very similar to the actual test date. They just framed them a little differently. I would go through all the wrong answers that you got, know why you got it wrong, because sometimes they'll flip the question around and one of the wrong answers are now the right answer. So yeah, that's pretty much all I did.
Just one thing I wanted to jump in with real quick is obviously there's a lot of content on the MCAT that you need to know, but the logic of the test is something that's crucial to really get a feel for and understand. So like everyone's been saying, the AAMC materials, I think that's a necessity to be working on those practice tests and practice with the actual timing of the test. With the shortened MCAT exam, which I took, I saw a lot of people afterwards, they didn't practice with the shortened time and it really threw them off and they ran out of time. And so it's super important to really get yourself ready for that testing environment and be used to the logic they use as well.
Awesome. So thank you so much, everyone, for your responses for that. I'm actually also going to drop in this free resource into the chat for everyone. So Free the MCAT is a team that I'm actually a part of. We work on basically like free MCAT notes and some videos as well. So definitely check that out if you guys especially are like struggling with stuff like cars, because we already have the videos up for that. And it's completely free. So the next thing we're going to go on to is senior year. And then actually once you finish explaining McKenna, we're going to go into everyone's questions.
So senior year, I guess, is when you start your interviews, depending on whether or not you decide to take a gap year or how you decide to structure your pre-med journey. Again, monitor your application status, your experiences, your submission, your GPA, and what I've asked everybody and like the doctors I've talked to is to always have a plan B. If you're banking on getting into medical school the time that you want and it doesn't happen, it's going to be hard. So always have a plan B that you can fall back on and you can retry again or just like have a different experience to that so you can have other things to say. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. So basically now we're going to just go into people's questions. So a little of these are kind of on the lengthy side, so I'm going to try my best to summarize them. Okay, so the first one that we got from someone is about the length and start time of their experiences. So basically with COVID, a lot of people aren't able to get certain experiences right now. So for example, like research or maybe shadowing is kind of like not as available. So they were wondering if it would reflect badly if they had to put those things off until after COVID, in your opinions.
My understanding with applications, particularly this cycle, is medical schools understand that, everyone's being affected by the there's only so much you can do, so the classic just, do your best, look for everything you can. I know there are some ways you can get involved online as well if you really want to keep up with, volunteering and being active in your community. So I'd recommend looking into that if you really want to make sure that you're keeping up on some hours.
I mean, yeah, I think she did a good job kind of explaining it. I mean, we're in a global pandemic, so like med schools are not going to be like, oh, you didn't volunteer in person. That's so weird during COVID. So, and I see this question like a lot on like pre-med forums because everyone's freaking out about it. And it's definitely, not the worst question, but you have to realize that it's affecting everybody and everybody's going through it. Like Ruby said, like med schools aren't going to hold that against you. And if they do, I think there's something wrong with the adcoms at that med school because it's completely out of your control. And that's also about like prereqs online. Like if your school's online, you have to take it online. So I think through this, it's kind of hard and it's stressing a lot of people out. But I think that once this is all over, I think you might just have to, maybe push a little bit harder to get more in-person experiences. But for now, there's nothing you can do about it. So, make the best of it and try and do your best and, maybe focus on coursework or maybe even get involved in like clinical research that's offsite. You can do retrospective studies offsite. You can do systematic reviews offsite. You just got to sort of think outside the box at this time.
Yeah, that's my advice too. They're going to understand, but the best thing you can do is, and what they love to hear is overcoming a challenge, turning it into a positive. So any way you can think of doing that, people are starting podcasts, contact tracing, like anything you can do, I think is good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add other than what everyone else has said. We're in the same spot as medical school students. We're supposed to get research done and be boosting our applications for residency programs, and that's kind of on freeze too. So everyone's going through it, and I think they totally understand.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. So the next question we have is, what do you recommend? I think what they meant is, what do you recommend or how to approach asking a doctor to shadow them? So what do you recommend for that?
I've personally seen there's kind of formats, like formatted letters for how to approach doctors online and in forums and whatnot. I don't think that's too difficult to find. I personally haven't done this, but I know.
Yeah. So with approaching doctors, believe it or not, I know that doctors are crazy busy and they always have a lot of stuff going on, but they actually truly do help it. They truly do like teaching and helping like the future generation of physicians. So if you reach out to their office or anything and just say, hey, I'm interested in shadowing Dr. So-and-so, usually you'll get a positive response. And to be honest with you, like a lot may say no, but just realize you just need one to say yes to go and get an experience. So I would always say just reach out to offices, be proactive, show the doctor that you want to actually be involved and you want to learn from them. And I think that's probably the best way to do it. I think like I said, you might get a few no's, but you're only going to need that one yes.
I 100% agree with Alex. I think doctors are super busy. They seem intimidating sometimes, but kind of the whole ethos of medicine is giving back and teaching and always learning. So they love to have students there. So don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing as everyone else. If you can't get hold of the doctor, then, I mean, maybe reach out to someone at the front desk, one of his or her assistants. And that's, I mean, if they're really busy, someone else will be able to answer for them and they'll definitely want to help if they can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the next question someone had was, they asked if any of you double majored. So I guess we can kind of talk about maybe what you guys majored in and if you guys had any minors or stuff like that. And then they asked about how you managed to coordinate classes with extracurriculars, time management.
So I was not a double major. I majored in biomedical sciences, and it was a very intensive course. In the UK, you apply to a major, not to a school in general. So day one, I was right in with, metabolic biochemistry, microbiology, et cetera, in labs. And sometimes, you don't have time to do some extracurriculars, but I would say kind of try and manage your course load. For even future years, just try to figure out what you need to take and what you're going to do. And with careful time management and hard work, it can absolutely be balanced. I spent a year also volunteering at a local school while completing my sophomore year of courses as well. So it can be done as long as you're really on top of it.
Yeah, so I wasn't a double major. I was just a traditional biology major. I would say that, the balance, at least in terms of like athletics, it definitely gets challenging because like a lot of outside experiences, they take up a lot of your time and you want to be involved with them. You want to get a good experience. You want to get a good amount of hours. I would always recommend do something you truly enjoy doing. There's nothing worse than, wasting your time at an experience that you're not having fun with. But to sort of like touch up on like, I definitely think it can be done with, even being a double major. I mean, even in medical school, we're mandated to volunteer. So it's extremely hectic. And I think most medical schools basically make their first year med students and even second year volunteers. So I would just try and find time, but definitely don't let your coursework slip.
So I majored in finance and accounting, so dual major. This was before I wanted to go to medical school. And when I did decide to switch, I was so close to finishing that I just finished it out and decided to do the post-bac. So yeah.
I was pretty generic, just majored in biology, kind of fulfilled all the prereqs, didn't really do any crazy classes or upper divisions, just kind of fulfilled the major and the requirements. And then with extracurriculars, it really took some time. I'd say my freshman year, I definitely didn't do that much. I was playing baseball at the time, but I didn't feel like I had the time. I kind of had to figure out my studying, figure out what I needed to do to succeed in classes. So I think it's important to really take that first year and kind of figure out what works for you and then kind of start building on it. Maybe do a little more extracurriculars as you're going. I really try to use like the weekends and the breaks to my advantage to get some extracurriculars done. But just make sure you're staying on top of your coursework because at the end of the day, doing a ton of extracurriculars doesn't make up for a 2.5 GPA.
Okay, so the next question, this person had a lot of questions. Okay, so the first one that they had was how to stand out in a large public university. That makes sense. So I guess we can start out with that. How to stand out.
So I would definitely say, just from my personal experience, I've gotten involved in, research, study opportunities, volunteering that I'm genuinely passionate about and interested in. I think it's fairly obvious if you're just doing things to check the boxes and you don't necessarily care, you're not necessarily particularly inspired by it. So I think really finding something you're truly interested in and want to dedicate yourself to and, work hard in. When you're applying, medical schools can tell.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. They can tell if you're really genuinely interested in something. And I think that, passion, so to speak, is something that will make you stand out.
So is this stand out in terms of like through experience, or is it stand out in terms of like getting a letter of recommendation and, sitting in a lecture hall of like 150 students and trying to get like a very like personal statement?
Not really quite sure which one they were going for, but I think we can go with the latter.
Okay. I mean, I went to a pretty big public university. To be honest with you, I don't really have like a great answer for this stand out. I think if you sort of keep your head down and just work really hard, I think that sort of speaks for itself. And to be honest with you, I went to a university that probably wouldn't be rated like a really good university either. So now I'm in a big university and not the best, but I think you just have to make the most of your circumstances and, you know, just excel in all your classes and make sure it translates over to an MCAT. But I really don't have like a big, you know, a big explanation for this, but I do just want to touch on, if you are stuck in a big university and you're worried about letters of recommendation, definitely just meet up with professors either at office hours or anything, just to spark up a small conversation. It can go a long way, and, you know, hopefully your name will sort of stick in their head as you're going on with your career.
I agree with Ruby. Like, just do things you genuinely enjoy, and then also don't rely on like these pre-med clubs to send out like opportunities. Like, meet people, talk to people, send out cold emails, cold call, and try to find things that way, because I think that's how you get like really unique experiences no one else has.
Yeah, this doesn't really apply to me because I was at a really small school of about 900 to 1100 students. So I don't really know how to answer that. I think the biggest thing is just be proactive. Whether you're at a small school, big school, anyone can get into medical school. It's all about just doing the work you need to get done, doing well in classes, and just being proactive as possible.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's see, next question. Okay, we'll go with this one. How did each of you answer the question, why medical school? It's a little personal, but.
In high school, I was set on being an actor. That clearly didn't happen. So I had someone close to me died of melanoma. And at the time, I was kind of fostering a new interest in biology. And so I was kind of like, well, if I can do anything to help people in these positions, I want to do that because I'm interested in this subject. So that's what led me to pursue my undergraduate degree. And at that point, I was thinking I just wanted to go into research and do a PhD. And as I got more into the medical side of my degree and looking at, you know, how you do diagnostics and things like that, I found that, you know, I really enjoyed that aspect of my degree and I found it really interesting. So I started to kind of think more about pursuing medicine. I'm still very interested in the research side of things and how to improve medicine at the point of care. But ultimately, I think the best way to kind of put those interests and goals into fruition is through pursuing an MD. So that's kind of how I got to that point.
So mine is a little bit, I think, like not as like intense. That was a really good story. Ruby, mine, to be honest with you guys, I got hurt a lot as an athlete. And was interacting with a bunch of surgeons and orthosurgeons, and just sort of fell in love with it. And from a young age, I loved anatomy, and I did love helping people as well. So I know that doesn't make for like a crazy good story, but I knew that I was drawn to either physical therapy or medicine, and I think I just like the procedural base of surgery better. So, you know, that's why I'm still interested in pursuing something surgical, and you can't do that without an MD or a DO. So I decided to go to medical school.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of when I was working in finance, basically, I saw like my boss and my boss's boss, and I kind of felt trapped. And for like personal reasons and some family influences, I got drawn to medicine. And like the more I like got into it, the more I felt like I became a better person, and just like I thought it just made me a better version of myself. So.
My story was honestly pretty identical to Alex's. I played baseball, broke over 5 or 6 bones, so constantly was at the doctor's office, going to orthopedic surgeons, and I kind of since high school wanted to go into medicine. And actually, I'm from South Africa. I'm kind of witnessing like the differences in healthcare accessibility. And I definitely wanted to be more hands-on and interacting with people constantly rather than having like a desk job, and impacting a person's life. So that's kind of what pushed me to medicine.
Okay, so I think we're gonna do 2 more questions since we're running low on time. These are kind of be like quicker answers. But basically one of them is just gonna be broadly just for high school students since we have a few on here. What do you recommend for high school students that are interested in pursuing medicine in terms of maybe activities or things to like look into?
I know that there's plenty of like summer sort of volunteer internship opportunities targeted at high school students who are interested in medicine. It doesn't take a lot of digging to find that kind of stuff online. It's also never too early to start getting involved in more volunteer experience as well. I think those are kind of the 2 top ways you can start sort of finding your way into that field and, really see if this is a career path you're interested in, and B, if you are, you have a really solid foundation for continuing onwards.
I think for high school, it is really early. I wouldn't, I would definitely recommend maybe if you want to shadow one time. I think for the older high schoolers, at least, I think shadowing might be an appropriate if you wanted to go check it out. But to be completely honest with the high schoolers in here, I think this is the time to really focus on grades, focus on, where you're looking to go to college, whether or not they have a good pre-med track. Because you'll come to find that when you're applying to medical school, they won't accept really anything from high school. They usually don't look at that as sort of a current enough experience, unless it was something that you did since high school that rolled into college and actually impacted, your time in college as well. So for right now, I would truly just recommend, excelling in classes. Maybe, honestly, a museum by me had like an IMAX, like 3D, like not 3D, but an IMAX surgery of like a valve replacement of a heart where you could like interact with like the surgeon that did it. So if, places offer something like that and you just want to sort of see if you enjoy medicine and enjoy sort of that process of medicine, I would say do that. But there's not a whole lot you could do to be proactive in terms of like your application, but maybe just sort of plan out what your 4 years in college will look like.
Yeah, I would just say maybe a little volunteering and shadowing as a high school student to see if you like it. And then just think carefully about where you go to undergrad. When you're applying to medical school, I would say GPA and MCAT kind of can trump where you go to undergrad. So maybe go somewhere that's not going to cost you as much. Something I wish I did.
Yeah, kind of building off what everyone else said. It doesn't really matter what you're doing in high school. I would try to figure out what you want to do rather than like forcing it. Try to figure out if you're actually interested in medicine. It's a long journey. You kind of want to be committed to it. So figure out, shadow if you can, do some clinical volunteering if possible, and just kind of like get a feel for if you enjoy it or not, rather than you're not really checking off any boxes because it's not going to benefit you in any way for your applications.
Okay, thanks everyone. So actually it seems like we have, come to the conclusion of this webinar. But if anyone has follow-up questions, you can definitely, I'll pop the email address kind of in the chat. And then obviously me and McKenna are like pre-med students, so we can try to answer some of them. But if there are some that are remaining, we'll forward them to you guys.
Cool.
Yeah. Do you want our email as well?
If you guys are comfortable with that, you can go ahead and put that too.
Yeah, in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. And then I'll give everyone a couple of seconds to just copy that down before I end the call. But yeah, okay.
Oh shit.